stuff. You want to talk about the queen some?
Yeah, so part of this is understanding the effect the queen's had so we can peel it out from the effect of the treatments.
So let me explain what we're looking at.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
This upside down. The first one is Golden West, which is Randy Oliver's stock, raised produced by Ray Alvarez Honeybees, Orland, California. And as near as I can figure, after a lot of questions, they're doing a very good job of maintaining Randy's genetics in there. Indian Summer Honey Farms, that's Florida. Santa Fe Queens, that's Florida. Caucasian by Caucasian is our Caucasian daughters from an artificially inseminated Caucasian breeder queen, mated in a region that we have permeated the Caucasian drone population heavily. And then the Caucasian by Poline is our Caucasian daughters mated in an area where we had 4 or 5 yards of nothing but Poline. Okay. So they, there you go.
And those are Poline direct from?
They came from I forget the sister company. It's Merrimack Apiaries. Okay. And they have a sister company down in Louisiana. That's where they came from. It's basically the stock that Frank Rinkovich has been using, I believe. Poline by Caucasian is Poline daughter queens produced from Poline breeders we got from Frank Rinkovich at the USDA lab in Baton Rouge. Poline by Poline would mean those daughters from those breeder queens mated with the same Merrimack Apiaries Poline stock, and then the queen question mark are those queens that we really can't tell where they came from because we didn't keep records from last year on them or something. So that explains what you're about to talk about.
Yeah, and I know you have impressions as beekeepers about how each of these are to work with.
Right.
But we also get quite profound differences in how resistant to Varroa they appear to be. So I've already spoken a little bit about these unknown queens being the ones that performed by far the worst, but that's not a
surprise. Yeah.
I don't think it's interesting for this discussion. I do think, again, it points towards intentional queen breeding programs being good at what they do. And the random feral queens picked up from here and there are going to be unpredictable compared to breeders that are really focusing in on what they're trying to get their colonies to look like.
Yeah.
Of the known parentages, the ones that fared the worst were the purebred Caucasians from here. On average, across all the treatments and whether or not nukes were made from them and these other factors, so on average, they popped out with almost exactly 3 mites per wash on average, which isn't horrendous in the grand scheme of things, but
there were some horrendous ones in those numbers. I remember a few that had some pretty high numbers.
We've seen some.
And you get that not just with bees, but as I've mentioned before, I was trained in disease biology and parasitology, and it's well known across that part of biology that you always get a few very heavily infected or infested individuals. The distribution of parasites is always quite extreme, where you get a lot of them concentrated in very few.
Okay.
And so that's just something that we expect in working on parasites. It can just be a bit shocking when you observe it.
Yeah, it's like, wow.
As y'all did.
Yeah.
Because you're going to say, well, what's wrong with that one? But that's just a feature across this entire area of research, whether you're looking at parasites in fish, parasites in birds, diseases in frogs, plants. You get a few individuals that are just really full of parasites or disease compared to their
and we saw that.
peers. So that's to be expected.
Little different subject, but as beekeepers for the last several decades, we've been treating all of our colonies across the board.
Yeah.
So we're keeping those colonies alive too. And they're part of the genetic makeup out there. Whereas Mother Nature, those would have been long gone.
Purged, indeed. Now, while the pure Caucasians were sort of the worst performing from a Varroa perspective, your Caucasian Poline or Poline Caucasian crosses performed the best. in terms of Varroa numbers, which I know wasn't what you were expecting to hear.
No, it's interesting.
And when I first did this analysis, I actually separated it out as you'd described here, Bob, looking at whether it mattered that the maternal line was Caucasian or Pole versus the paternal line, and they behave essentially indistinguishably. So we're going to talk about them as one block, because the numbers are the same. They're not just not significantly different, they're statistically identical almost.
Well, I'm not going to try to explain that one. You got any explanation for
well,
that?
you know, with so why the two are the same?
Yeah, is there some I don't even know what to say, hybrid something?
Oh, like a hybrid vigor, I think is what you'd mentioned.
They were
before.
very nice bees. In fact, they were both crosses were very nice.
No, they were all right.
And the yards looked good, the bees looked good, and they were even acting like a cross, like they were. Yeah. Their characteristics were from both worlds, a little bit Italian, a little bit Caucasian, which is really what I personally like. Yeah, but very gentle, very nice, produced honey, did everything it's supposed to do.
Yeah, and the numbers look good for them. And so these kind of first generation Pole Caucasians, you know, you had less than one mite on average in those washes. That's across crazy. your various treatments, so which is pretty excellent, I think. And then next up, in terms of being Varroa resistant, you have these Santa Fe queens from Florida coming in at about 1.4 mites on average at that wash point, and then these Golden West, which are a little higher at 1.9ish, but still less than 2 mites per wash, so pretty decently. And then the Indian Summer, they were on par with the Caucasians, clocking in about 2.9 or 3 mites per wash. So we get, you know, quite the range there from less than 1 Varroa per wash with these Caucasian Pole hybrids, right up to 3 Varroa per wash in the Caucasians and the Indian Summer.
The Caucasians in this study were not from the breeder queen that Jesse was using that had showed us 0 mite wash after a year and a half of no treatment. They were just from our normal Caucasian.
Standard.
We actually have a Caucasian breeder queen that we used late in summer that had not been treated for a year and a half and had still recently still had 0 in a wash.
Yep.
And we actually found a number of Caucasians in the no treatment section of our outfit that were showing zeros.
Yeah, you did.
Which leads me to another point. I met up with Randy Oliver in Alabama at a convention last weekend, and we had a nice talk. And I told him that I thought that every bee population had the potential for mite resistant in there. You just got to find it. And he entirely agreed.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that as well.
So we've got some Caucasians in our whole outfit. It might only be 1% or 2%, but they're there.
Yeah, they're there.
And we're going to pull them out and start, utilizing them too.
And I think that's why washing every colony can. I know it's expensive. I know we've talked before about keeping good staff fed and housed.
That's the other part. I should have kept tabs of all their labor and expense here. I think it would have been quite a bit. But I'm buying into Randy said this. He said, "I thought in time it became worth it. It paid off because not only are you generating good stock for mite resistance, but you're beginning over the years to have to treat less and less and less." So we did find a number of colonies this year that we didn't treat because the mite numbers were so low. So it offset the cost a little bit, and then of course it helps us generate this. This genetics that we want.
Exactly.
And I think as the years go on, I think the cost will offset more and more and more, where it'll become more and more worth it.
Yeah. And we might one day know what it is about those queens that lets them be so Varroa resistant, but we might not, and that doesn't matter. All we need to know is that they don't die to Varroa.
Right.
That's another
or
point,
that they keep a Varroa low specifically, because that's really the clincher.
Yeah, there's a lot of mechanism. If you just search only for VSH trait, I personally feel like you could be missing some other traits.
Yeah.
And that's why I like the idea of simply choosing the colonies that have very low numbers. I know you can do the Harbo assay thing where you look for the mites in the brood. That would work. But I don't think that's the route we're going to go. That's pretty labor intensive.
It is, and we published earlier this year talking about these different ways of achieving Varroa resistance, and this sort of mechanism blind approach not only can work and work well, but who knows what novel parts of the bee genetics might show up as doing something that we've not seen before, which to me is exciting.
Sounds like us in a nutshell. What'd you just say? You called it mechanism blind.
Right.
Yes, that works.
Absolutely.
Okay, so anything else there?
Well, I mean, I suppose I'd be interested to hear how you found working these different queens or colonies, and how that lines up with their Varroa resistance.
This sounds like we're going to be picking on somebody, and I don't mean it to be that way. When we compare, so you just got through telling us that the Santa Fe had the lowest numbers.
After the Pole Caucasian crosses, they were the ones that really.
But if I was going to choose between them and Golden West, I'd choose Golden West because they're much notably gentler.
Right.
And I'm all about not getting stung in my old age. So the Indians, summer were average. They're not bad to work with.
Yeah.
And I know that Chris is actually pulling in stock from Corey Stevens. He told me they were going to be grafting a lot from Corey Stevens queens, and so he's working towards mite resistance.
Towards integrating some
so
new phenotypes.
Chris is a serious beekeeper. I would expect if we were using his queens and doing the same thing next year, I think we'd probably see a difference.
And I think that would be really cool to see in the numbers.
Yeah, it would.
The effectiveness of these beekeeping breeders changing their approach and it yielding results,
cool.
because we've got the before point here. Go ahead,
what I'm really, really excited about next year is we have about a dozen Caucasian queens that were not treated and they remained a zero. We washed them again a month later, still zeros. And if we graft from those queens and mate them with these Golden West drone stock areas, I'd love to see how they
what they produce.
Well, not only that, but we're going to even pull out of the Golden West and pull the good ones and isolate them in different regions. We've got a couple of yards where we can isolate the very best of the best.
Sure.
And we can mate with
mountains are great for that.
Huh?
Mountains are great for that.
Mountains and hollers as they call it. We got some yards pretty deep down a holler, so that works.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah, and I think
the other surprise was that these pole line crosses were so nice to work with.
Yeah, they were.
I did not expect that because, in my opinion, the pole line mated with pole line were not the most gentle either. So we all noticed it. It isn't just me. They all said the same thing.
Interesting.
But the pole line crosses, both directions, were very nice.
Yeah, so and they performed strongest out of everyone, even better than these kind of pole crosses, which something a bit weird was going on with them, I think. And it's not uncommon for meaner bees to be mite resistant. We've seen that time and time again across both breeding efforts here in Europe and obviously with the hybrid bees that came out of early work in Brazil. We know that feisty bees often do well in face of Varroa. It's just whether or not we want to put up with that. And when we have alternatives like we've demonstrated here, we probably want to make sure we do those. I got to be careful here talking about my friends. By no means would we consider any of these bees vicious. No. They're just not as gentle as ours are. Yeah. I think we don't frequently get very vicious bees in Georgia. I've had one colony in my more than 10 years of doing beekeeping in this region that I genuinely thought was worrisome rather than just unpleasant, because those are two different things, right?
That's a polite word.
Worrisome, where it's the only occasion where I've had to actually walk away from a colony while it's been open because I thought things were getting a bit too aggro.
Me and Selena experienced one yesterday.
Yes.
Really?
The same one.
Yes,
yeah,
and it's
Lake Charles.
Lake Charles.
I know
one
we all know.
That's always the case.
I think you helped me out last time. You
always know.
I was walking over.
Now we're getting a new queen next spring, no doubt about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, listen, thanks a lot for doing this.
No, it's
thanks
been
a
my
lot for
pleasure.
traveling over here to share this with us. And I'll get all these numbers from you, and I'll create tables to go in my video, and we'll try to make it look pretty.
And however you think is best communicating it, Bob. We've got these averages sort of across the experiment, but one of the strengths of this sort of approach is You know, you can ask me, well, we didn't test this one treatment with this queen, but we can predict based on all the other information what we think that would be. So any combination we can kind of pose to the model, and it tells us what we should think would happen based on all the rest of the data, and that's really the strength of this.
Okay, I'd like to see that also. Okay, so in a minute when we shut this down, I'll talk to you about just what you can send.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Got any more questions, John? Jesse, you got any questions?
I did, but I didn't write them down.
Dang.
Let's see. Treatment pictures, answer. I had a bullet point list, but I think we covered it all. All right, thanks a lot.
My pleasure. And thank you all for doing all this work. I get to do the easy bit
Thank
with just
you.
some coffee at my desk. Y'all were the ones out there in the Georgia heat getting the work done.
Well, about halfway through, we really took it to heart and actually were having fun with it.
Yeah, seeing what we could.
Like, whoa, look at that. What's that? You know. Yeah, we had a lot of fun with it.
Good.
We really
I'm
did.
glad.
Yeah.
All right, thank you,
All
Lewis.
right. Cheers, Bob.
Yeah.